So I'm going to share something with you that I wish someone had told me years ago, because there's a lie that gets passed around in our field from therapist to therapist, supervisor to supervisor. And I believe that it's quietly keeping some of the most capable, mission-driven clinicians or healthcare professionals stuck. So by the end of this hour, you're going to see it clearly. And once you do, you can't unsee it. So let's start with what's actually happening right now in our field, not in theory, but in real life. Every month that goes by without clinicians having a sustainable structure, another clinician ends up hitting a wall, right? They reduce their caseload, they leave the field entirely, they quietly stop caring as much as they used to, because the system was never built to sustain them. I even see this happening in Facebook groups. I'm sure all of you are in therapist Facebook groups, and there's so much toxicity out there right now amongst our field. And I feel like that is because we are not set up in the right structure to sustain us. And so we end up burning out and burning out really hardcore. And so then what happens to the communities that you want to serve, right? They keep going without access, not because there aren't enough skilled therapists, but because the systems that those therapists work in don't allow them to show up in the way that they want to. And so that ends up being the cost of staying stuck. It's not just personal, it's like this ripple outward effect that happens in our field. So if you're honest with yourself right now, and you probably have felt this in your own work, whether it's now or previously, you're carrying a full caseload, you're juggling sliding scale clients, insurance panels, maybe even Medicaid, Medicare, Headway, AMA, whatever it is, you're adjusting your schedule, maybe every week, every quarter, just trying to make the numbers work, right, in our practice. And at the end of the month, you end up still wondering, is there a way to do this work without running myself into the ground? That question to me is not a sign of weakness. To me, it's a sign of intelligence, because the answer is yes, but it requires something that most of us were never given. And here's the thing that, we do all kind of talk about. Now it's more talked about, that our grad programs taught us how to hold space for other people. If you went to a good program, it taught you assessment, diagnosis, treatment planning, ethics, boundaries, all of that, right? But it never taught you how to build a structure of a practice, of a business that holds space for you. We're not taught that in school, not financially, not operationally, not in a way that sustains us long term. And that gap between your clinical skill and your structural knowledge is where most therapists get stuck, right? There's like a whole continuum between those two thoughts of knowledge. Not because they're incapable, they were just never given the information. So I want to tell you a little bit about what changed for me, because it wasn't what I expected. I used to think that I needed to work harder, see more clients, say yes to more things, push through more exhaustion. And for a while, I did that. For years and years, I did that. But fundamentally, nothing changed for me. What finally shifted wasn't my effort, it was my understanding of structure. Once I saw that the problem wasn't me, it was a model that I was operating inside of, everything truly opened up. And that's exactly what I want to walk you through today, because I still do this today. I run my nonprofit. I'm actually in my office right now, my nonprofit. I've been running it for 13 years. So I'm going to share a little bit about my journey in that and what it looks like, and how I have helped other therapists do the same thing. So let me introduce myself. Some of you may know me, some of you may not. My name is Dr. Lawson. I'm a licensed therapist in Pennsylvania and California, and I specialize in helping clinicians and other healthcare professionals, not just clinicians, but the health field, to build nonprofit group practices that are legally sound, financially sustainable, and aligned with your values. Like, that is really, really important to me. So I've personally guided over 50 therapists through this process, from the very first conversation about whether this is even possible for them, all the way through having a legally compliant nonprofit that's up and running. And I support a community of over 1,000 clinicians who are navigating this work in different stages. If you're not part of my community, I'm just going to put the link in the chat. It's a free Facebook group where I do trainings every single week. And you can access those trainings for free in this Facebook group. So I'm just going to pop that there. So what I'm going to share with you today is just not, it's not theory. It's not something that I read about. It's not anything that I've made up and Googled or ChatGPT. It's what I've built. I've been doing this every single day, and I help others do it every single day because I see it working in the real world. And I feel like in our field, we're stuck in a dichotomy. We either work in community mental health and burn ourselves out, or we go into private pay practice, which nothing is wrong with that. But oftentimes we feel like something is missing, right? And that's this third path that I'm teaching people about. So as I said, if you're just joining, we're just diving in and getting started. As I go through this, pop questions in the chat because I'm going to stay on at the end and answer any questions that came up for all of you. Anything from thinking about starting a nonprofit to you actually have one, but you don't know what to do with it. So all questions are welcome. So what we're going to cover today is first, and this is the foundation to everything, I'm going to show you why effort is not the issue and structure is the issue. I'm going to talk a lot about structure. It's totally underestimated. Most therapists I work with are not lacking in effort. They're not lazy. They're not uncommitted. They're some of the hardest working professionals that I know. And that's actually part of the problem because when effort isn't producing the results that you want, our natural instinct as therapists is to push harder. But pushing harder inside a broken structure just accelerates the burnout. And I think that's a lot of times why people burn out and are kind of spit out of community mental health because we push harder because that's our natural instincts. And then we burn out because the structure is broken. So what I'm talking about is very different from community mental health, but the business model is set up the same as that. So second, I'm going to walk you through the real difference between doing what I talk about as meaningful clinical work, which you're all most likely already doing, and building something that sustains the clinical work, because those two things are very different. You can be an exceptional clinician and still be operating inside a model that's slowly draining you. And so until you see that distinction, it's almost impossible to know what to change and where to start. The third thing that we're going to cover today is the part that changes everything. I'm going to bust 4 specific myths about nonprofits that keep therapists in this cycle. These are beliefs that get passed around in our field as if they're facts, and they're not facts. And I'm going to tell you the truth behind these myths. So once you see that, you'll understand exactly why you feel stuck and what the actual path forward looks like for you. So we're going to dive in. And I want to share something that's really important to know, because I know that our field right now is inundated with coaches and people selling like how to do private practice and charging your worth, which I totally believe in all that. And I think that we need people to show us how to, run businesses, but this is not generic recycled business advice. This is not some random entrepreneurship framework that someone slapped a therapy label on. And this is not a model that requires you to sacrifice your income, your control, or your integrity to make it work. That is some of the myths that we're going to go over is about your income and your control in this if you decide you want to operate a nonprofit. But I know that you've probably seen offers like that and you've probably been burned out by some of that advice because those people don't understand our reality of working in the mental health field and what we do as therapists. And that's what I know inside and out, right? Because I'm in this field every single day. I do this every day. So I want you to hold me to that as we go through it. So my promise to you in the next hour is that what most therapists spend years piecing together through trial and error, expensive consultations, conflicting Google searches is going to make sense to you today. Not because I'm going to oversimplify it, but because I want to lay it out clearly so you can see what the actual path is to form a nonprofit therapy practice. I think it's really important that you have all the information up front so that you can make an informed decision that's what's best for you. And if you decide the nonprofit route is not for you, that's totally okay. That's cool. I think we need all types of business models out there, right? So in the chat, I'm going to go through 3 people, and I want you to identify for me if you're one of these 3 people. You probably see yourself in them. The first one is Marcus. Marcus represents the therapist or the health professional who's working in an agency or a community mental health setting, right? So you're doing incredible, meaningful work. You're seeing the clients that nobody else wants to see. You're doing crisis intervention, underserved populations, the cases that nobody wants to take. But the system you're inside is limiting your impact, right? You're underpaid, you're overworked, you're undervalued, and you're starting to wonder if there's a way to build something sustainable on your own terms. But you don't want to lose the mission that drives you. So let me know if you're a Marcus. I definitely have been a Marcus very early in my career. I started out in community mental health, which is, I mean, for years I was in community mental health, which is what drove me to want to change the system in the way that I could, right, with the limits that I was given. The second one is a Jennifer. This is where most of the people I talk to end up being Jennifers. Jennifer's already in private practice. Maybe she's a solo practitioner, maybe she's a group practitioner, but she's doing sliding scale. She's taking Medicaid, she's maybe taking Medicare, she's taking commercial insurance, she's serving the people that she cares about, but she's slowly realizing that she's essentially running an accidental nonprofit, right? So an accidental nonprofit is where you actually qualify as a nonprofit, but you're set up as a for-profit. So you can't access things that a nonprofit would. So she's already doing the work of a mission-driven organization without any of the structure, without the tax benefits or the support of additional revenue streams like fundraising and grants. And so the whole thing ends up depending entirely on her. So let me know if you're a Jennifer, or you think you might be a Jennifer. The next one is Rachel. I work with a lot of Rachels too. Rachel is financially successful. She has a thriving group practice. From the outside, everything looks great, but something feels misaligned. She knows that she has the skills, the resources, and the expertise to serve populations, but they can't currently access her level of care because of the expense that it costs to do the services that she does, right? And so she's been quietly thinking about this for years, thinking about starting a nonprofit. How can she use her skill set, right, for things that she's paid a lot of money to do, like EMDR, IFS, all those specialized trainings that cost an arm and a leg that we need to see our return on investment by charging higher rates. But she's like, how can I do this while giving access to people who wouldn't otherwise be able to afford services like EMDR? So, but she's running a group practice. So she's like, maybe someday. This is something I'll do someday, right? Okay, so I see some comments coming in. Definitely a Marcus. I see a Rachel. There's always a Rachel in here. I've worked with lots of Rachels. In fact, I'm going to give you an example of a Rachel where I started her nonprofit in Texas and offered those specialized trainings like EMDR. So I'll share more about that. I see Marcus. Yeah, I was a Marcus, for sure, Marcus. I mean, community mental health is tough, right? It definitely makes you question, do I even want to be in this field? Is this feasible? Can I do this long term? I felt that way when I worked on a children's crisis team in California. We went out by ourselves, not in teams, to anywhere in the community that called us. Like when I look back on that now and the lack of safety that was put in place for us, like my mind is blown that I was just sent into any random home. I went to a mall once to assess a kid for suicidality. I've been to parks, I've been to hospitals, and just being like, wow, how can I do this and like live and not carry this emotional burden, right? So I feel for the Marcuses because I've been there. So what I want to share is as you hold on to who you are, and we'll get to why that's important in a second, whether you're a Marcus, a Jennifer, or Rachel, I want to be really clear about what I do and who it's for. So this is for you if you're doing meaningful work, whether you're a Marcus, Rachel, or Jennifer. We're all mostly doing the meaningful work, right? It's impactful clinical work. Doesn't matter who we're serving it, that too. But it doesn't feel structurally sustainable. You can feel it in your body. It's something about the way it's set up that doesn't hold. And so you just kind of make it week by week. And this is for you if you're burned out inside a system that limits your impact. So whether you're in an agency, whether you're in a solo practice that depends entirely on you, or a group practice model that doesn't align with your values, the common thread is the same in all the therapists that I talk to. The structure is working against you, not for you. It is all about the structure. And so this is for you if you do want the real lasting impact, but you do refuse to sacrifice your income, your control, and your integrity to get it. Because to me, you shouldn't have to. And so I'm going to show you why you don't have to do that and why this model of a nonprofit therapy practice actually works. So It's also important for me to be equally clear about who this is not for. This is not for you if you're looking for a shortcut that skips the legal and ethical boundaries. I won't help you cut corners with this. I won't pretend that compliance doesn't matter in a nonprofit, because it does. And if you want someone to just file the paperwork and you'll figure it out later, like, I'm not that person. I do this because I want people to have something sustainable that supports their life. And so if you want someone to tell you it's going to be easy, I won't do that either, because building a nonprofit is meaningful, rewarding work, and it does take real effort, real compliance, and real commitment. And I won't ever minimize that, right? We need to set it up the right way so that it can sustain you long term. And that's not a quick, easy fix. But what I will do is make the path clear, ethical, and achievable. So there's a big difference between easy and doing it right with the correct support. So that's what we're here for. Because I do get people who are like, oh, well, can you just set it up this way so that I can like get a loophole with tax cuts? Like, no, that's not what I'm here for. And that's not what I do. If you really want to give access to communities that can't access your services, then that's what I do. So I hear from therapists almost more than anything that they're tired of feeling like the only way to be sustainable is to compromise what they care about. Raise your rates so high that the people who need you the most can't afford you. Take on a caseload that solely destroys your health. Work inside a system that treats you like a billing unit. It starts to feel like sustainability and your own values are in direct competition with each other, and that's exhausting. I think if you've ever been a Marcus, you have probably felt like a billing unit at some point or another. And that just takes away like our motivation to do the work that of why we got in this field, right? So what you actually want and what I'm going to show you exists. It's a model where serving your community and sustaining yourself are actually not in competition. So where impact and stability, they coexist by design. It's intentional. It's designed that way. It's not by accident. It's on purpose. So that is the structure that I'm talking about. And most therapists just haven't been shown how it works. They don't even know that you can do this, or they've been told that it's illegal. So we'll get to that too in the myths. So I'm going to take you back for a minute, because I've been in this exact place. I was building something I really believed in while working in community mental health and working with populations that I cared about, doing clinical work that mattered to me. And the whole time I was quietly wondering, is this structure underneath this going to actually hold? Can I really do this? This was back when I actually filed the formation paperwork, but I couldn't actually execute services because like this fear was holding me back, right? Is this sustainable? Am I doing it right? Is there something that I'm missing that's going to come back and bite me? And the uncertainty of that is really heavy. And a lot of times what ends up happening is we freeze in those moments and then we don't do anything with it. It just becomes this pipe dream that never becomes a reality. And so I see that constantly in the therapists that I work with. They truly think that this is just some pipe dream that they'll never be able to execute. And so I've been in that place. Every therapist I talk to, they have a different story, different background, different practice setting, different financial situation. But underneath all of it, the strain ends up being the same. The feeling of doing the meaningful work inside a structure that doesn't support it and wondering if there's a better way, but truly just not knowing where to start, not knowing how to do it. So we end up doing what anyone would do. We adjust our fees, right? We rework our schedules. We say yes to one more client because you need the income. And because also it's hard to say no to people in need. I still struggle with this all the time. And you try a new insurance panel, you restructure your sliding scale. Like we've all been there, we've all done that. And still nothing feels like it's settled. You're constantly in motion, but the fundamental right shift doesn't happen. So let me know if you felt this way in your practice, whether you're a Rachel or a Jennifer. Usually this is where you feel that the most, or you just feel like stuck in your agency work. And here's the part that gets to people. You're never quite sure if the problem is you or the system. I think by now most of us know it's the system, but the system has a way of creating this self-doubt within us, whether we think we're not business savvy enough. Maybe you should be able to have figured this out by now. Maybe other therapists have cracked the code and you're just missing something. Self-doubt is real and it shows up. It shows up every day, even for my clients that have started a nonprofit. It's one of the big pieces that I work on when I work with people because it's real and it's heavy and it keeps us in this place of going around in circles. And I don't feel like ever it's a reflection of your capability as a therapist. It's a reflection of the gap in information that you were given. So it's really important to keep that in mind as you go through and learn like the novelty of starting a nonprofit because it's not talked about. So it just feels like so much self-doubt creeps in and that blocks us from moving forward with it. So that's what happened to me. And when it hit me, and I realized the problem wasn't my commitment, it wasn't my work ethic, and it was never my clinical skill, it was just the structure underneath it. And the people that helped me come out of that were actually two retired CEOs. One was a retired CEO, one was a retired CFO. And they were like, Lauren, you started this nonprofit, you formed it 2 years ago, and you've done nothing with it. Why haven't you launched? And it was that fear, it was that uncertainty. And they were like, you just need to do this right now. We are telling you, we've been CEOs and CFOs in our career in nonprofits. You need to launch this. And that was like the moment that it hit for me. That I was, trying to previously build something sustainable inside a model that wasn't designed for sustainability. And that's what I was creating in my own model. And so once I stopped blaming myself and started looking at the structure, that's when it all changed. It is all about the structure. I said I would say that multiple times because I really want it to sink in. This is about a structure problem, not a therapist problem. And so that's the shift that I want to give you today. So what I want you to know that this really isn't just my story. I have done hundreds of calls with therapists over the last 3 years, and it's all the same details. Different details, same pattern. It's the same pattern, right? And so when we dig deeper, when we push past the surface level frustration that we all feel into what's actually holding them back, it almost always comes back to beliefs, right? And so in this case, I have found that it is 4 specific beliefs that were taught, absorbed, or assumed were true about starting nonprofits. So I'm going to show you what they are, and I'm going to debunk those beliefs today. So these are the ones that keep therapists stuck. And I call them myths because they are widely believed. They do feel true, but they're not true. So every one of these gets repeated in our field by supervisors, colleagues, well-meaning professionals. And it gets repeated because they just simply don't know better. And so every one of them has a clear factual answer. So I'm going to walk you through them. And this is where a lot of people end up, having a lot of questions. So again, put your questions in the chat and I'm going to stay on and answer them at the end. But myth number 1 is, and this is a big one, that this isn't legal. We're not allowed to do this. As therapists or health professionals, we're not allowed to form nonprofits, or at least it's not legal for someone like me, like a solo practitioner, right? This myth stops more therapists than any other one because they assume there's some rule that they don't know about, some licensing board restriction, some conflict of interest that makes it impossible. And so they end up never even looking into it because they've already decided the door is closed. And so here's the actual truth. Nonprofits, we can start them as therapists. They can legally operate alongside a private practice if that's what you want. Your licensing board has zero issue with this model. I have looked into so many licensing boards, and most of them don't even say anything about the business model structure. And for some of them, and I'll give an example, that do say something about the business model, they aren't actually talking about nonprofits. They're not mentioned at all. So people assume that means you can't start a nonprofit. So boards have zero issue with therapists starting nonprofits. It's not a gray area. It's not a loophole. It is established. It's a clear structure that thousands of therapists are doing, but not only thousands of therapists, this is how community mental health is structured. So we all know that community mental health is in every single state. I have not come across a community mental health structure that is not organized as a nonprofit. And we are therapists working in that model. We just don't think that it can apply to the private practice model, which it can. It's just not set up as a for-profit. So one of the gray areas that people get confused by. It's not actually a gray area, but people think it is. And I'm going to use California as an example. And I think I saw people in here who are from California. California BBS regulations talk about us forming as a professional corporation, which is a for-profit structure. But the BBS regulations do not mention anything about not setting up as a nonprofit. They just talk about setting up as a professional corporation, and they have rules and regulations around if you are structured as a professional corporation. They don't have any rules or regulations if you're set up as a nonprofit. They just don't talk about that. So people interpret the regs as if you have to set up as a professional corporation. Here's where you can kind of see that conflicts with another BBS reg, like that assumption conflicts with a reg. We all know in California, this is not true in most other states, but it is true in California, that in order to have interns and practicums in a have interns and practicums work in your practice, you have to be a nonprofit. Interns and practicums are not allowed to have their practicumship or internship in a for-profit practice. It has to be a nonprofit. So if the regs supposedly say we're not allowed to start as a nonprofit, then why do practicum and internship students have to work in a nonprofit to accrue those hours? Those two things don't make sense. And so when there's false information that floats out there that people think are authority figures, we get wrong information. One of them is actually PAVE, which is DCFS in California. PAVE has interpreted the BBS regulations falsely, saying that we're not allowed to organize as nonprofits. And I came across this earlier this year, and I was like kind of blown away. And I was like, that can't be true. So if any of you are in California, you know that if you're part of CAMP, you get to consult with a lawyer. You can contact the BBS, all that good stuff. So I contacted CAMP, and I also contacted the BBS, and I said, hey, did you know that PAVE is saying we're not allowed to organize as nonprofits? From my understanding, that's not true. And also from my understanding, it's still true that practicum and intern students have to work in a nonprofit. And so what CAMP told me was that PAVE has been interpreting the regulations wrong and spreading misinformation to thousands of therapists across California for 7 years, and that the BBS and CAMP have been trying to work with PAVE to get them to understand that they are misinterpreting the regulations for BBS. So this is why this myth is so huge to me, because you're given false information by people who you think are in authority roles that would know the answer, and they're actually giving false information. So it's really important that you know the rules and the regs in your specific state. So myth number 2, nonprofits can't generate real revenue. So if I go this route, I'm basically taking a pay cut. This one is so deeply ingrained, right? Because people hear the word nonprofit and immediately think no money, no profit. They picture underfunded organizations out there running on donations and hope, and they think that they can't afford to do that. They have student loans, they have bills, they have families, right? Can't afford to take a step back. And I totally get that. If that were true, I'd be saying the same thing. Like, I can't not make money, even though I want to serve these clients. Like, I have to be able to afford my life. But here's the truth, is that nonprofit is a tax classification. Nonprofit, the definition does not mean no profit. It does not mean no revenue. It is a tax classification. It is a business model setup. It's not a financial statement. And a well-structured nonprofit generates revenue through all kinds of things: client fees, insurance reimbursement, grants, donations, county contracts, local contracts. And in many cases, a strategically designed nonprofit generates more sustainable revenue than a solo private practice, because it can access these funding streams that private practices can't, right? As a private practice, you might be able to fundraise if you go through the proper state regulations and get the permits that you need, but you have to pay taxes on that fundraising because that's considered income. In a nonprofit, you are tax exempt at the corporate level, so you do not have to pay taxes on grants, donations, any kind of revenue that comes in. So that is why it is false and a huge misunderstanding that people think nonprofit means no profit. What it means is that any profit that is made throughout the year is going back into the nonprofit to serve the general public. And that your funding has to come from, a third of it has to come from public funding. And we'll talk about what public funding is. A lot of people misunderstand what that actually means. But the bottom line is you're not taking a pay cut, you're actually restructuring for long-term financial sustainability. And those are two very different things. And they're important things to understand. Myth number 3, you can't pay yourself well, and you definitely can't pay your staff well. And along with this myth, I get a lot that you can't pay yourself at all. Like, a lot of people are under the impression that you have to be a volunteer in a nonprofit. And so this one is hard for me because it's a myth that keeps good clinicians in systems that undervalue them. They think that going nonprofit means accepting low pay for themselves and for anyone else who works for them. And that directly contradicts with why they want to do this in the first place, right? So the truth is, you absolutely can pay yourself and your team market rate salaries inside of a nonprofit. A strategically designed nonprofit budgets for competitive compensation from day one. And that is so important. So I'm going to say it again. A strategically designed nonprofit specifically budgets for compensation, competitive compensation from day one. That is so important because it's not an afterthought, it's built into the structure. And again, this is why structure is the problem, not us as therapists, because these are things that we don't know how to do. So the myth, though, comes from nonprofits out there who are underfunded, nonprofits that weren't designed well, or they didn't know how to structure it correctly, not from the actual nonprofit model itself. So it's really important to understand that when you build it right, fair compensation is part of the plan, period. So just to give you some real life numbers, and I'm trying to think if I know this off the top of my head, but well, I know my salary off the top of my head. So I started my nonprofit 13 years ago. For 10 years, I worked in community mental health, working my way up the leadership chain, and then also worked in my nonprofit. And then when I had my 2 sons, I was like, oh my God, I can't do this anymore in community mental health. I'm finally going to like take this leap of faith and go into my nonprofit full time. So since 2022, we have tripled our revenue in the nonprofit. And I now make in Pennsylvania, in Amish country, if any of you know what that is, basically cost of living is pretty low comparatively to California. I make $123,000 a year working 3 days a week in my nonprofit, and my caseload is about 10 clients a week. That is more than I made in community mental health. When I was a clinical manager of a residential program in California, overseeing res, PHP, IOP, I was making 80K in California, Ventura, California. And then I moved back to Pennsylvania and I became a regional director at a large nonprofit overseeing 27 clinical programs. 27 clinical programs. Not kidding. I literally could list them off the top of my head because I was financially responsible for all those programs, and I made 115K at the most. I started out there in that role at 92 and I ended at 115. I now make 123K working 3 days a week, seeing 10 clients a week, and leading my team. This is the happiest, least burnout I've ever been. And I'm crazy and I like to fill my schedule. And that's why I started, helping other therapists, because I was like, well, I need something else to do, I guess, instead of just enjoying my life. But this part has been really fun for me, but it is possible. And I help other clinicians do the same thing. I'm not the only one that has this story. So I'll share more about that in a couple slides. So myth number 4, this is the one for the Jennifers and the Rachels out there. And this keeps you up at night. You think, if I build a nonprofit, I have to hand over control to a board. Someone else will be making the decisions about my vision. And so you've spent years building something, your practice, your reputation, your clinical approach, and the idea of giving that up to some board feels terrifying. And I completely understand that. Everyone hears, and I hear it all the time, that a board could kick you out. And yeah, that is technically true. A board could kick you out, but that's not what a board is there for. So the truth is, you design the initial board, you choose the initial members, and you set the governance structure in your bylaws. And a board exists for compliance and strategic support, oversight, right? They are not in the day-to-day operations. A board does not handle day-to-day operations, whether it's a large nonprofit or a small nonprofit. So they're not there to override your leadership. They're not there to overtake your vision. They are there to make sure that you are staying compliant and doing what you say you're doing as a nonprofit. So in addition, a well-designed board is there to make you stronger, right? Ideally, they're people who have connections to the community, who can complement the skills that you don't have, right? So I have someone on my board that has been in compliance for a long time. She's the one that I go to if I have any questions about compliance. I have someone else on my board that has done significant amount of fundraising and grant writing, right? Those are skills that I don't have. So that's a huge asset to me for my board. But you maintain control over your clinical vision, your programs, and how you serve your community. Your vision stays protected, and that's how you build it. So that is built into the bylaws, and it's also just built into what a board does. A board is there for strategic oversight. They're not there for day-to-day operational things. So I want to pause and answer some questions that came up in my last workshop because I get these questions a lot. They weren't hypothetical. These are from real therapists who were in my last webinar in April. And so I wanted to answer them in case any of you are sitting here thinking of these same questions. The first one is, can I run a for-profit and a nonprofit at the same time? Yes. This is one of the most common structures in the people that I work with and what I build. They are two completely separate legal entities. They have separate missions, separate finances, separate governance. Your private practice usually keeps running exactly as it is, serving your full-time clients. This is like for the Rachels, right, that don't want to give up their full fee practice and operating under your current model. And then you start a nonprofit that exists alongside the for-profit, expanding your reach to populations that you can't access, but that you've wanted to under the private practice model. So the key is, and this is where compliance lives, is that keeping them both cleanly separated. They have to be separated, separate bank accounts, no commingling of funds, no crossover of resources without proper documentation and without board oversight, right? So when it's built correctly, it's not a gray area. It's an established, well-documented structure that a lot of clinicians do across the country. And that's if you want to do it that way. You don't have to. My next question is like another way that you can operate if you decide to, and that is, can you transition your existing for-profit practice into a nonprofit, and what are the benefits of doing that? And the answer is yes, you can. There are two different paths to doing this. So if you have a for-profit, this is for the Jennifers, right? You're an accidental nonprofit, but you are not getting the benefits of a nonprofit. So you take insurance, you take Medicaid, you offer sliding scale, but you're set up as a for-profit model, and therefore you have to pay corporate income tax. So you're saying probably, 5 to 30% of your income for taxes, and you can't access things like grants or donations because you're not set up as a nonprofit. So if you're fully transitioning, there's two different ways that people end up doing this. One, they do the full transition upfront. I'm actually doing this now for a client in California, in San Jose, a super, super cool private practice that was started 3 years ago. And from the beginning, they have taken Medi-Cal in California. From the beginning, they have taken insurance and they've offered sliding scale, but they didn't know that they could set themselves up as a nonprofit. So they're doing the transition now, and we're doing one full swoop of the transition. And so when you actually fill out the application for the IRS asks you if you are transitioning from a for-profit to a nonprofit, and we can do that all in one full sweep. The second option with this is to transfer over time. So you can start the nonprofit and then slowly transfer over programs and services one at a time at a slower pace. So it's really up to each founder and what they decide. Some people want to do it all at once, and some people aren't totally sure that they're ready to give up their for-profit. So they want to start both and then decide, okay, does it make sense to transfer everything under the nonprofit and go with the nonprofit model? So it just depends on where you're at. Third question that I get, and this one is like really important for me to answer and give you the full details on. And that is, can you start a nonprofit as a pre-licensed clinician? I work with a lot of pre-licensed clinicians. I was actually a pre-licensed clinician when I started my nonprofit. The short answer is yes, you can legally form a nonprofit before you hold full clinical licensure. Starting a nonprofit and the rules of a nonprofit, according to the IRS, has nothing to do with being a licensed clinician. They are two completely separate things. So that part is true. You can start a nonprofit as a pre-licensed clinician. They 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 don't overlap. They have nothing to do with one another. What does matter is if you decide you want to provide clinical services under the nonprofit that you start as a pre-licensed clinician, because you still need to have clinical supervision oversight. And so that is really important to set up in the right way so that no one interprets you as providing clinical services independently as a pre-licensed clinician. Some states do allow that, by the way. Some states, I know Pennsylvania does, other states where you can set up your own private practice as long as you have a clinical supervisor, and the private practice can be under your name. In California, that is not the case. And in other states, that's not the case. So you just need to make sure that it is in line with the board regulations. And we design the nonprofit around those regulations so that you're protected, the nonprofit's protected, and there's no question of the clinical hours that you accrue under the nonprofit. So it all depends on the structure and how we decide that to set that up, and the state of that you're getting licensed in, because each state is a little bit different with this regulation. So I want you to sit with this for a moment. If it's legal, and it is, and if it's financially viable, and it is, and if you can pay yourself well, you can, and if you can maintain control, which you do, then what is actually stopping you from starting this? I'll tell you what it is, or what I think it is. It's not you. It's not a lack of skill or ambition or commitment to this. It's the fact that no one just gave you the information. No one shared it clearly, ethically, in a way that made sense for you until now. So the only thing standing between you and a legally compliant, financially sustainable nonprofit is the structure that you were given, never given. Not a personality trait. It's not a business degree. You don't need another business degree. You don't need to be a lawyer that specializes in nonprofit. You don't need more hustle. You don't need more sacrifice. It is structure. You need a clear, ethical, step-by-step structure that's designed specifically for therapists. And the structure exists. So here's the part that I really want to land. This does not have to take years of trial and error. You don't have to Google your way through nonprofit law. You don't have to hire 3 different professionals who each give you different answers. You don't have to figure it out alone in your spare time between sessions when you can barely eat. There is a faster, clearer way to do this. And so I'm going to share with you how I do it. So for the first time, you're seeing a path that was built specifically for therapists. It's not for generic entrepreneurs, not for people who are leading a tech nonprofit. It's for licensed clinicians or pre-licensed clinicians who understand clinical responsibility, the clinical boundaries, and the realities of providing mental health care. When you go and talk to a lawyer, and I've done this, or talk to a CPA, they do not understand the world that we are working in because they haven't done it. So that's what makes this different. It's built by someone who lives in your world every day and knows what's at stake in this field. So this is why I created the Done For You structure, the nonprofit quick start package for therapist-led nonprofits. So you don't have to guess, Google, or hope your way into doing it right. We do it right the first time. So every step is legally sound. Every document is ethically grounded. And every piece of this is built with protection of your vision and your license. It's not built around mine, it's yours, because this is your nonprofit. I just make sure the structure underneath it is solid so that you can grow and scale the nonprofit. So it's designed to take you exactly from where you are right now, that place of, I think I want to do this, but I don't know how, all the way to a legally compliant, financially sustainable nonprofit that actually works in the real world. So it's not just one that looks good on paper, but falls apart in practice. It's real, it's operational, and it's clinically sound. That's the piece that's so, so important to me. So how it works is essentially you bring the vision and I build the structure. I do every filing for you, every document, every compliance step. It's all handled. You don't have to become an expert, like I said, in nonprofit law. You don't really have to learn IRS filing language. I break that down for you. Your job is to know who you want to serve and why, and then I take care of the rest. And I think it's really important to let everybody know, like, this is not a course. This is not something that you have like a library of videos that you have to go watch, take notes, and then try and figure out how to apply it. This is actual implementation. So someone doing it with you and for you. It's both of those things. And so that's fundamentally different because I know as therapists, you are all stretched thin on time and energy. And so the difference between those two things is really important. And that's why I designed this way. I used to do it as like a course and realized that doesn't work for people. So who's this built for? It's built for therapists and mental health professionals who want to expand their impact beyond the limits of their current structure. So whether that's an agency, a solo practice, group practice, wherever you're at, it's designed for you as a therapist. It's for therapists who know somewhere deep down that they're called to launch a nonprofit. So maybe you've been thinking about it for months. Maybe you've been thinking about it for years, but you feel that this is a calling and it's something that you want to do. You just don't know how to do it. So that's who this is for. And it's for therapists who've known they want to do this and they've tried researching it. And they've talked to a lawyer who said one thing, a CPA who said another. You've Googled it and you've gotten 15 different answers. And none of those professionals truly understand what a therapist-led nonprofit looks like because it is a very specific model. And that's not their fault, but it does become your problem. And so that's why I have built this. So it's also for therapists who want a clear ethical path for approval. So a lot of times what happens is when you submit the IRS application on your own, you get rejected and you have to waste your time, your money, and sometimes your integrity on the process. People end up sacrificing or not following it within compliance, and they get in trouble later on, right? So there's different applications that you can do. And if you don't do the right one, you could get the nonprofit revoked, the 501c3 status revoked later on. And so you don't want to do that. You want to get it done right the first time so that this doesn't come back to bite you 3 years down the line. So I'm going to walk you through what it looks like inside the package. And then at the end, I'm going to open it up for questions and we can just leave it open-ended, jam a little bit, and I'll send you a free resource that I have. And then, if anyone wants to talk afterwards, we can do that. So the nonprofit quick start package, here's what you actually get. The very first thing is articles of incorporation and bylaws. These are custom drafted for your state and your specific clinical model. It's not a template. It's not generic. It's not like this, PDF that I pull and just slap your name on it. I actually go through the state regs and then so there's two state regs, right? There's the state regs for our clinical licenses, and then there's the regulations for Secretary of State for articles of incorporation. They are different state by state. Then you get your 501c3 application. This is what actually makes you a nonprofit at the federal level. So first we do it at the state level, then we do it at the federal level. I have 100% rate of getting it approved the first time. I've never had an application denied in the last 3 years that I've been doing this for other therapists. So it's designed to get it to be approved right the first time. You also get a board member guide selection so that you know exactly how to recruit, how to structure governance, how to protect your clinical vision. And so if you remember myth number 4, this is how you make sure your board strengthens your organization and so you don't feel threatened by it. You also get a 5-year business plan with financial projections. And people are like, why the heck do you do that for us? Well, because this whole time I've been talking about structure, and we can't just do the formation documents without building out a 5-year business plan that you can follow, that's easy to follow and understand. And that to me includes financial projections. If you remember when I said I oversaw 27 different clinical lines of service, that was 27 different financial lines of service. And so I've gotten really, really good at how to build this out for sustainable nonprofits. And I do it in my own nonprofit. I do it all the time. I'm always in my financials because a nonprofit without revenue isn't sustainable. And so this gives you the financial roadmap. So you're not just legally compliant with the formation, you're actually financially sustainable from day one. It's not like from day one you're going to make 100K, but it definitely is a roadmap to get you there by year 3 and to continue to scale by year 5. You'll also get a comprehensive SOP. And an SOP, if you're not familiar with that, is standard operating procedure. It is different than policies and procedures. So you get policies and procedures, but an SOP is taking what you do and describing how you do it. And to me, this is what I've learned over the years is foundational to structure, not only a business plan with financial projections, but SOPs. You have to have SOPs that work in real time so that your nonprofit stays consistent, people are trained well, and that leads to retention. So this is what separates a nonprofit from what's technically legal to one that's fully operational. So that is super important for me that I include for you in this. And then you get 2 45-minute strategy sessions with me personally. So one-on-one coaching to refine your mission, adapt all of these documents, answer any questions that you have, like talk you through like how to actually implement what I build for you. Those are really fun. I just did one wrap up yesterday for someone in Jersey who is not only a licensed clinician, but a BCBA specialist. And she had no idea that as a BCBA, you could build commercial insurance without setting up what's called an IBHS program. If you're not in PA in Jersey, you might not know that acronym. Tons of acronyms in our field, but it's essentially kind of like wraparound or TBS services. Except with tons of state regulations, that's really hard to run. And so she didn't know that you could do this. And so we built that into her nonprofit. And she was someone who had been Googling nonprofit for years. And she was like, I just got so much conflicting advice. I didn't know what to do with it. So we just did her one-on-one session earlier this week. And then I met with a woman in San Jose for her onboarding session. So what you end up with is a clinically compliant structure that works in the real world. And so it's built specifically for therapists, which I've already mentioned, who you don't want IRS rejection and you don't want to wait a year to get started. So this is for people who are ready to do this right now. My Facebook group is more for people who are unsure if they want to do this. So if you're unsure and you need to watch more training videos, I highly recommend the Facebook group. I put the link in the chat earlier. You just have to scroll up. The Done For You package is for people who are ready to start their nonprofit now. And if you're not ready for that, no pressure. Like you need to make sure this is right for you. But it's important for you to know that I build this for you in 2 weeks. You don't get necessarily approved by the IRS in 2 weeks, but the structure is built for you in 2 weeks because I do this in my sleep. The time for the actual approval from the IRS right now is about 3 to 4 weeks. So we get your application done and submitted within 2 weeks, and then you're waiting another 3 to 4 weeks for IRS approval. And then once you get that approval letter, you're off and running. You can actually implement your business plan for your nonprofit. So it really is that fast to get it set up, only because I've done this over and over and over, and I have the process honed in now. So let me show you what it looks like after you actually buy, and we'll go into price in a minute. But the way it looks is you book a short 15-minute consultation with me. This is like your kickoff call. We review your vision, talk through your timeline, and I'll answer any initial questions so that you're clear on where you're headed. I know where you're headed. You've already enrolled, so this is us just like doing that kickoff. Step 2 is you complete an onboarding form for me. This is necessary for me to understand like your state, your clinical model, whether you're pre-licensed, licensed, ask you all those questions. It takes about 15 minutes to fill out. You submit that, and then you schedule your first 45-minute strategy session. On that session, we are actually doing your state registration, your IRS application, your governance walkthrough, answering any questions that you have. We're filing the paperwork together so that you know exactly what we're doing and why. And those sessions are recorded so that you can go back and watch them. But this is where like the real work begins. After that strategy session, I'm going behind the scenes with your onboarding form and I'm building out your entire package. So again, that includes your business plan, financial projections, your SOP, policies and procedures, your board guidebook, all that kind of good stuff. It is important to note that the state filing fees in the IRS application are not included in this. Those have to be paid separately by you, but usually the state fees are like, at most I've seen $50. Usually they're $25. And I do see questions coming in, so I'll make sure I get to them. And then the IRS application, depending on which one you qualify for, the cheaper one is 250, the other one I believe is 600. Those are one-time fees. You don't ever have to pay those again. So, like I said, step 4 is I build everything behind the scenes for you. You get a video walkthrough of what I build for you, and then it's a Google Drive. And then once I send you that Google Drive, it's all yours. You get to keep that. You get to tailor it however you want, use it ongoing. I almost never touch it again unless I'm like, looking at someone else who's in a similar state. But it's yours to keep. So you get to copy and paste it and then move it to your own Google Drive. And then after that, we do our second strategy call. So this is like a wrap up. We go over everything in the package, answer questions. At this point, we've already filed for the IRS. You most likely have your state approval back by this point. So you're fully registered within 3 weeks. So that's the process. It's 6 steps, 2 strategy sessions, and every document is built for you. And then it's a structure that you can stand behind that makes you feel sustainable and like you're actually doing the work that you want to do. So I'm going to skip some of this stuff just so we can get into, these are nonprofit builds that I've done for other people. I'm just trying to keep an eye on the time. I don't want to go super over. So I'm just going to get to the meat of it. So the package is $997. That's it. Honestly, I think you're going to pay more for a lawyer just to have a consult. But it's $997. And then, that's less than what most therapists spend on one consultation, like I said, with a lawyer or a CPA. So I'm going to put the link in the chat, and then I'm also going to give you a free guide. The free guide that I'm going to put in here is, well, here's the checkout if you want to look at the link. I also have a QR code in a second, but I want to give you a free handout that I created for just hanging on with me while I went through this. It's called The 5 Most Expensive Mistakes When Starting a Nonprofit Practice. And then I'm going to get to those questions that I saw. So I want to tell you about the bonus, though. If you enroll within 5 days, so that's by Tuesday. And by the way, I have payment plans. So you can either pay the $997 up front or do a payment plan of it's over 3 months, and I think it's like 300 something. And we start right away with the first payment. And then it's automatic that the other payments come out in the next 2 months. But if you enroll within 5 days, so by next Tuesday, you get 2 months free of group coaching with me at no additional cost. My group coaching program is $275 a month. We do two group coaching calls a week on Mondays and Thursdays. And this is where other people in my program were actually implementing, right? They already have their foundation built, and now they're actually implementing the business plans that I've built for them. So to me, this is really important because building a nonprofit is only half the equation. Running it well is what makes it last. So that's really what the group coaching is for. So if you're interested and you want to enroll, you'll get that. If you enroll by Tuesday, you'll get that free bonus of 2 months of group coaching. And then here's the QR code if you just want to scan and look at the checkout. And then let me go through. I saw some questions come in. I don't think I missed any about that. Okay. Let me go to this first one. So if you transition, this is Melody. Yes, if you transition a for-profit practice into a nonprofit, can you continue to see clients while you're raising funding for the services being provided? Yes. So if you already have a for-profit practice, and Melody, maybe you have an example, but how do you get reimbursed now for your services? You're probably cash pay or you take some sort of insurance, right? That doesn't change in the nonprofit model. So that stays. So let's say you have a client that can afford your fee at $250. You can still charge that same client, $250 under the nonprofit. What's different about it is that in a nonprofit, if you don't already offer a sliding scale, you have to offer a sliding scale, however you decide to structure that sliding scale. And you have to be able to provide affordable and accessible services to the general public. That's what qualifies for a nonprofit. It doesn't mean that people who can't afford let me back that up. It doesn't mean that people who can afford your services don't have to pay the full fee. They absolutely can. So when you talk about a sliding scale, you have tiers, right? You have your rate, and let's say your rate is $250, and then you have a rate that is maybe $175, and then you have a rate that's 100, and then maybe you have a rate for people like your interns to see that's, 80 or below. People who come and can afford the 250 rate based on their income, if that's how you decide to do your sliding scale, still pay the 250. So that doesn't change. We have lots of clients in our nonprofit that pays our fee of 250. 250 is what we charge for family therapy. That is for licensed clinicians who do family therapy. If you're an intern, obviously we're not charging 250 because they just don't have the clinical skill and it's different. With our interns, because the intern, we're essentially only paying for EHR is our overhead for interns. We will offer as low as $30, $20. I think we actually have a client that lost her insurance and we're charging $10. We use Open Path Collective for those cash pay sliding scale clients. There's a ton of clients on Open Path that need services. So anyway, I hope I answered your question, but you absolutely can continue to see clients and use your regular funding source while you're transitioning. Okay, next question. In California, can pre-licensed clinicians start a nonprofit if they have outside supervision and that won't be working at the nonprofit? Yes, I actually, Michelle, helped someone. We're actually literally in the middle of helping someone now. So she's a pre-licensed clinician. She actually isn't even an associate yet. She's getting ready to graduate, and she's in San Francisco. And she is starting her nonprofit. As a pre-licensed clinician, she called CAMF. This was actually like 3 weeks ago. Called CAMF, called BBS. To make sure you're in line with BBS regulations, you cannot be on the board of the nonprofit while you are a pre-licensed clinician. You have to have an independently operated board. You can't be on the board. If you're a licensed clinician, you can be on your board. In terms of clinical supervision, there's two different paths to clinical supervision as a pre-licensed clinician. Someone who's just supervising you for your hours. So let's say you get on Open Path Collective and you take cash pay clients at a sliding scale and you do some fundraising, maybe go after some small grants. You have a clinical supervisor they don't have to be employed at the nonprofit. They can be a 1099 contractor. That is okay. We ran that by the BBS and CAMF. You have to be a W-2 of the nonprofit. So all associates in California have to be a W-2. You can't be a 1099 contractor. So the supervision can be contracted with another licensed clinician if you don't have someone in-house to provide that license supervision. So with the person that I'm working with now, I actually connected her to a clinical supervisor in San Francisco who's a previous client of mine from 2 years ago who started her nonprofit. And I said, hey, this current client is looking for clinical supervision. I actually had about 5 of my previous clients who started nonprofits in California say they were interested, but it ended up working out because the person who is going to supervise her is in San Francisco and she's in San Francisco. So, but Michelle, if you have other questions about that, you can just email me or ask in the chat or unmute or whatever. I'm happy to answer more about the pre-license stuff because I know it gets complicated with BBS. Can you show the page with the nonprofit? Oh, yeah. Let me go back to that. I just rushed through that because I always run out of time. I talk a lot. So I'll show you this real quick. Let me go to, okay. So the first one is Hope for the Journey Collective in Texas. This is actually run by Tracy, Perry. I think that's how you say her name. She's in a lot of groups. You might have seen her, but she was a Rachel. She had a successful for-profit practice that was generating almost $1 million in revenue, right? But she felt like that she wasn't serving her community, trained in EMDR, complex trauma. And so she came to me in early 25 and asked to transition to a nonprofit. And so we talked it through. She already had her board and she has been a fully compliant nonprofit since I believe it was April of 25. We did her Done For You package in February. By April, she was fully transitioned. Well Within Counseling Center. This is a nonprofit started by Katie Rhodes. She's in Virginia. She's a licensed psychologist. She was working for the oh my gosh, sometimes I have such mom brain. Water Patrol. I know that's not what you call it. The first responders on the water, whatever they're called. Someone help me out. Can't think of the name. She was working with those people. So she wanted to start a nonprofit helping first responders. And then I have Harrison Psychological Services. This is run by Dr. J. Harrison. Dr. J's in my group, my Facebook group. You'll see her post in there. She has a for-profit and a nonprofit. So she wanted to start a nonprofit so that she could do interns, pre-docs, people working towards their master's or doctoral level license in her state. She's in Wisconsin and Georgia. And then who's a Center for Resilient Beginnings. This is someone called named Amy Reamer. This was super cool. I loved working on this nonprofit because what Amy did was focus on early childhood, providing neuroscience-informed regulation support for infants, young children, and their caregivers in underserved communities. I was like, yes, I love this. This is like not enough out there here for this. So I have honestly quite a few other ones. I just didn't put them in here because I know I always run out of time, but those are the nonprofits that I've helped. Are you able to pay your interns? This actually depends on the rules with the universities. A lot of universities don't allow you to pay your interns. It's part of their internship, and they're actually paying for the internship by paying school tuition. So most of the time you don't pay your interns. Can you do it if the school doesn't care? Sure, you can, but there's a lot of overhead associated with bringing on paid interns, whether that's a stipend or not. You then have to enroll them in your payroll system. You have to hire them on as a W-2. There's so much more that goes into overhead when you hire people that honestly, it works a lot better, and you can serve more people if you don't pay your interns. I know that it sucks for interns, but we're still operating in the mental health system. And unfortunately, a lot of different insurance company stuff don't allow supervisory billing. A lot do, and that's like our bread and butter. But long story short, no, we don't pay our interns. Can you? Depends on the university that they go to. I'm just going to leave this QR code up so people can see it. Okay. I have a client now. Oh, yes, no problem. I love your offer. So thank you. Will you have another webinar? Yes, I will have another webinar. I scheduled it actually but this replay will be emailed out in 4 hours, by the way. So you'll be able to watch the replay. It's available until Tuesday, but I did schedule the next webinar for May 27th at noon Eastern time for anybody interested. Okay, could this nonprofit also offer non-therapy services? Yes, I'm so glad you're asking this question. This is a really important question. Michelle's asking, can you do other services that are not therapy related under the nonprofit model? 110% yes. I get a lot of clinicians that come to me who are like, I love the therapy side of things, but I also have this vision to do parent education workshops, to do case management, to do coaching, to do consulting, to do retreats, to do yoga work, to do Reiki, I had a client start a nonprofit and she did work with crystals. You could have a massage therapist, you could hire doctors. Honestly, anything that is like wellness related can be under your nonprofit model. And then you can even start a nonprofit that has nothing to do with health and wellness. If it fits the brand, you can do it under the same nonprofit. But that is the beauty about a nonprofit, is that technically you don't own it. So your license liability is not connected to the nonprofit itself. Your liabilities are separated. Whereas in a for-profit, right, you actually are advised against doing things that are non-clinical under the for-profit because it's associated with your clinical license. So that is the beauty as a nonprofit, is you could have multiple programs under the nonprofit that serve the community that are not necessarily mental health related or straight therapy. I have a client that does, she's in Texas, and she does, now I'm going to blank on it, but ketamine assisted therapy under her nonprofit, which is not billable by insurance, but it was really important to her to give access to services with that. Okay, anyway, I'll stop talking and keep going on forever. Okay. Aaron says, I currently work for a nonprofit hospital at the VA. I'm finishing up supervision for licensure. I should be licensed a little more. I have, yes. Public student loan. Yes, you absolutely can. The caveat, Aaron, is that you have to be working full-time for your nonprofit. So, right, that is a public student loan forgiveness rule. But I was working in community mental health the first 5 years of my public student loan forgiveness. And then the last 5 years, I was working under my own nonprofit, and I had my student loans forgiven under my nonprofit because I was working full time at that time. Now I work part time. I had stayed full time just for the public student loan forgiveness. I had $364,000 forgiven in November of 2024. I'll never forget that because I was like, wow, this actually legitimately exists, this public student loan forgiveness. So it does work and it's actually very easy to do. And I would say if you are, I have a couple of pieces of feedback for you. If you are about to be licensed in a month, I would start the nonprofit formation now because by the time you're licensed, that they will simultaneously line up perfectly for you. And it's not like you have to launch right away full time into your nonprofit. You can work at the VA and like build it up. But since you work at the VA, I'm very familiar with the VA services. My husband's a vet. He also works at the VA. So I'm familiar with like how their system works. Right now in like the last few years, the VA has been actually outsourcing a lot of their services. And so they've been doing contracting with other nonprofits to provide mental health services. I know they provide it in-house, but they also contract out to other community mental health. So if you want to stay working with vets, your nonprofit could contract with the VA. And clients that I know who've contracted with the VA, they pay really good rates. I think in California, it was actually higher than Medi-Cal. And for those of you that don't know, California Medi-Cal pays really good. That is like bread and butter of my nonprofit is Medi-Cal in California, Medicaid in PA. People are blown away when they hear the rates that you're actually paid for those publicly funded programs that absolutely counts as public funding under a nonprofit. Anyway, that was a side tangent, but okay, so you don't work for the VA, you're in, oh, Virginia, I'm sorry, Virginia. Um, so yeah, Virginia, I get it. And I plan on working, okay, got it, LGBT. Yeah, this is great. This is perfect. I've started, I think at this point, 2 or 3 nonprofits in Virginia. The one that I showed the example of, Katie Rhodes, she's a licensed psychologist. I'm sure she'd be happy to talk to you if you want me to connect her to you. But yeah, Virginia, either way, I would say, you're about to be licensed. Now's the time to start a nonprofit if you want to work under your nonprofit. Because once you're licensed, gosh, it just opens the door to being able to be credentialed and do supervisory billing. So if some of you are not aware of what supervisory billing is, this is like the bread and butter of sustainability in a nonprofit, is that the licensed clinician is credentialed with the insurer. So whether that's Medicaid, Medi-Cal, commercial insurance, whatever, not all commercial insurances allow it, not all Medicaids allow it. So you have to know the MCO, but that's something I help you do. And then the pre-licensed clinician or intern can bill under your license. So here in Pennsylvania, we went after a Medicaid contract in our local county where I'm sitting at now. It took us a year to get this contract because it just took forever. But once we did, we got inundated with referrals. And since the beginning of 2026, I know this is going to sound crazy, but I have hired 8 clinicians. I just got an email from my intake specialist this morning. She emails me every Friday if we don't meet. We got 17 referrals this week and brought on 7 new clients in 1 week. We're already almost capped and have to hire more clinicians. And we have 4 interns starting with us in the fall. So supervisory billing is huge if you're not already doing that. And sorry, that was a side tangent as well. Okay, so I don't see any more questions. If anyone wants to hop off mute and ask me a question, happy to do that. What will happen from here is I will download this recorded workshop webinar, and then it'll be emailed out in about 4 hours, and the replay will be available for 5 days until Tuesday, and then that bonus is available until Tuesday. If you're not ready yet and you come to me like a month from now, like the done for you package price doesn't change. It's $9.97. I really want it accessible and affordable while also paying myself for my work that I do for it. So I try to keep it as accessible as possible. So with that, I'll just leave for a minute or two. Does anyone have any other questions that you want to ask while you have me? Can this model work for offering therapy services virtually? Yes. Oh my gosh. Yes, absolutely. Right now, I'm in my office, but we didn't get an office in PA until September of 25. We've been operating in PA since 2019. And in California since 2013. And in California, we had an office space until COVID, and then we didn't for 5 years and then got an office space. So yes, it absolutely works for virtual services. Like that has nothing to do with the nonprofit model itself. Totally okay to do that.